In today's video, I wanted to finish up my adventure through House Hlaalu's questline featured in the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Welcome to episode 5 of Morrowind Madness, the makeshift series where I attempt to upload an in-depth part for this storyline every day up until Friday. If you're watching this on time, then you're probably saying, hey, today's Saturday. Yeah, it is. I'm one day late. If you're watching this any other time though, you could just ignore that whole part. Last time, I had wrapped up Odril Helvi's questline of corruption. The House Brother had asked me to replace some incorrect documents over at the Hall of Records. Knowing already that Helvi vied for the Ascadian Isles, I brought the papers right over to Crassius Curio. He took care of the forgeries while I still had to steal the original documents. Not the easiest thing for my character to do. After that, Odril had asked me to collect rent and taxes from the farmers of the Ascadian Isles. However, telling Uncle Crass about these demands, the councilman was more than willing to pay these dues on their behalf, and it was as simple as that. The next assignment was the last quest for Helvi's Ark. He wanted me to deliver some samples of ebony ore to a contact in Aldrun. Telling Crassius about it though, he urged me to change course. If I brought the ore to the Imperial Legion, it would be enough to warrant an arrest for both Odril and his fence. Choosing to do just that, Helvi was put on a prison boat and I was rewarded for my efforts. After that whole arc, I was free to work directly with Crassius again. His first quest had me confronting a barbarian named Velfred the Outlaw. Velfred was selling ebony ore on the side, and House Hlaalu wanted a cut of the profits. Next, Curio asked that I build a stronghold. The first phase of construction was rather simple. I spoke with Dondo Stryler in Balmora, acquired a land deed for 5,000 septums, and asked for permission from the Duke of Vardenfell. For phase 2 of construction, I had to secure some form of business in the area. This involved taking over the Shurdan Rapley egg mine, curing its Queen of Blight, and hiring some miners from Nissus. The end of phase 2 is where the Stronghold left off, but it was enough to continue my work with Curio. The next mission for his arc was a classic for great houses. Telvanni and Redoran had built their own strongholds as well, but they did theirs illegally. So, naturally, Hlaalu took it upon themselves to enact justice. I was sent to Indaris Manor in the Baal Isra region, and I executed its owner, Bandon Indaris. After that, Curio said that I should get the support of one more Hlaalu counselor. He suggested Dren, the elusive dark elf who tolerates outlanders. Finding the councilman in his secret hideout, he said that he would sponsor me under one condition. I needed to prove my strength. I was sent to the arena where I fought against his champion, guarding the bold. Barrow kept up his promises and vowed to support me on the council. This is where the story continues. Returning to Uncle Crass, he has just one more assignment for me, and I'm pretty sure we can all guess what it is. I took out the Redoran stronghold, so naturally, it's the Telvanni's turn to fall. First things first, I asked for an advancement in rank, and the councilman had promoted me to Housefather. That means that I'm just one position away from counselor. Now, when asked about business, Curio tells me about the Telvanni stronghold, Tel Uvirith, and that its owner, Reynel Uvirith, needs to go. In a previous segment, I've drawn a map on where Tel Uvirith is located. Thinking about it in hindsight, while I'm still of the opinion that it's inconvenient to get to, I suppose that's the whole point, isn't it? The Telvanni preferred to conduct their research and affairs in private, away from prying eyes. Lore-wise, I guess it actually makes a lot of sense that they'd build a stronghold far away from civilization and populated areas. Plus, Telvanni towers are probably trickier to erect than, say, a house along the river or a shell in the desert. I imagine the growth process wouldn't be conducive to gentle city life. In any case, similar to kill Bandon and Indaris, all I had to do for Reynel was enter the lower tower of Tel Uvirith, find Reynel Uvirith, and deliver a swift death. She's a level 16 mage and has an expansive spellbook, but it's not enough to overpower the Nerevarine. Tel Uvirith does have its fair share of treasures, however, I think the other two manors have more valuable loot to them. I could be wrong, and if so, please correct me down below, but in terms of pure resale value, Rethan and Indaris have a beat. In any case, with the job done, I was free to return to Vivec and report to Crassius. Uncle Crass rewarded me with 1,000 septums, and he told me he was proud of me. Thank you, Dumpling. With that, thus ends the quest, kill Reynel Uvirith. Like I mentioned before, that is unfortunately it for Crassius Curio. The prized author has no more quests for me and in fact directs me over to arguably the second most important person on Vvardenfell, Duke Vidam Dren. The Duke is the only person who can make me a counselor of House Hlaalu, and according to Curio, he's also the only person who can make me Grand Master. Speaking of which, today I learned that Dren was the previous Grand Master for House Hlaalu. After he was made Duke though, the role was essentially left vacant. Technically, I guess he is still the head honcho of the house, but pretty much all of his attention is on Vvardenfell as opposed to just the faction. So with all of that being said, where could this questline possibly go with Duke Vidam Dren involved? Well, the answer is everywhere, or more accurately, everything. The Duke wants a harmonized Morrowind. He wants everyone under the same chain of command, and due to his relations with the Empire, strives for stronger Imperial influences. The first step towards that, as he puts it, is finding a way to control the Ordinators. The Ordinators currently take orders from the Temple. However, the Duke says that as of late, they've been behaving like loose cannons. This could be attributed to Beryl Sala, the leader of the Ordinators. So, the Duke suggests that I completely bypass him and have a chat with Tholer Suryani. He's the Arcanon of the Temple and in theory should have more jurisdiction over the guards than Beryl. Dren calls him a decent and reasonable man and then hands me the key to his office in the High Fane. Luckily, a quick use of Almcivi intervention brings me right over to the Temple Canton of Vivec. This is literally just steps away from Tholer's quarters. Talk about convenient. Barging into the Arcanon's office, his opening dialogue is him asking me to leave, which is quite funny. Completely ignoring that, I asked him about putting a leash on the Ordinators. Suryani replied and said that while he understands the concern, they are a necessity to public safety, especially in these troubling times. Noticing the thread, I leaned in on his concerns and he began to list off all of Vvardenfell's woes. Blight, Dagothur, the Sixth House, the Empire, and turmoil between the great houses. Yeah, probably not the greatest time to have the Ordinators settle down, but he doesn't understand. I need that promotion. However, by the end of his dialogue, Tholer does mention that, on occasion, the Ordinators have failed with their duties. Leaning into that thread next, I could see the wheels turning in his brain. The Arcanon says that his soldiers were unable to retrieve the robe of St. Roris, a holy relic from the caverns of Asamanu. Asamanu is apparently overrun by Sixth House servants. This is where Tholer and I end up striking a deal. He says that if I retrieve the artifact and bring it to him, he'll speak to Beryl Sala and tell him to settle down. Sounding fair enough to me, I got my sword arm warmed up and made way for the Bitter Coast region. According to Suryani, Asamanu is somewhere in between Ebonheart and Seydanin. The landmarks are a wooden bridge and a small island. Well, this might come as a surprise, but for what may be the first time in this questline, I didn't have trouble finding it. Maybe my navigational skills are getting better. The caverns of Asamanu contain corpus monsters, dreamers, and an Atronach. The most difficult enemy in here is Dagoth Helvil, an Ascended Sleeper. In my opinion, as far as 6th House dungeons go, this one is pretty tame. There are no Ashghouls, zombies, or slaves. Plus, if you have the ability to pick a level 75 lock, you can get to the robe of St. Roris pretty quickly. It's stashed in a chest just above Dagoth Helvil's play area. The robe grants the user with the abilities of restoring fatigue and health for 15 points for 1 second each. That is decent, but yeah, unfortunately you don't get to keep it. Besides, with the questline's rewards, you can buy yourself some magical items that are 10 times more powerful. So, returning to Tholer in the High Fane, I handed him the robe, which, by the way, was apparently blessed with Roris's blood. The Arcanon felt the need to tell me that, so I felt the need to tell you that. With my end of the deal held up, Suryani vows to speak with Beryl Sala and will ensure that the Ordinators are only taking their orders from the temple. Perfect. Just, don't tell them that this benefits the Empire. I'm sure they'll take that news well. Recalling to Ebonheart and reporting to the Duke, he's already heard word of my accomplishments and says that I have his gratitude. So, does that mean I get a reward? Some gold? Maybe a ring? Well, possibly even better than any of those, I got promoted to the rank of Councilman. Now I'm on par with the likes of Drambiro and Crassius Curio. No more dumpling, pudding, or sweetie talk for me. I got what I wanted. With that, thus ends the quest, control the Ordinators. Speaking again with Vidam Dren, I asked him what comes next. This one came a little out of left field for me. The Duke said that in order to really step into a leadership role, he wants me to win control of the Kimona Tong. His brother, Orvas Dren, is their current leader. My objective is to create an alliance between a great house and Vvardenfell's top criminal organization. This should be easy, right? Orvas lives at Dren Plantation, and before heading over there, Vidam asks that if it comes down to it, I spare his brother's life. Yeah, we'll see about that one. During my travels through Morrowind, I've only had a few interactions with their leader. They've never been exactly positive either. For example, while trying to become Hordator for House Hlaalu, the merc kicked my teeth in over and over again. At the time, I might have been a pretty low level, I'm talking 10 or lower. However, coming in at well over level 20, I'm definitely not afraid to fight him this time around. Before I resort to that though, let's see if there's a peaceful way of resolving this matter. Arriving at the plantation, I began to ask around for Orvas. To my surprise, most of the guards around here were more than willing to give him up. I didn't know it at the time, but a lot of them are a part of House Hlaalu, so I guess that's why they were so cordial and friendly with me. After being directed to the top of Dren's villa, I laid eyes on Orvas and took a deep breath. Let's see how this one plays out. The conversation with Dren was super simple. He asked me what I had wanted, and I responded, "Full control of the Kmona Tong, please." That's more or less what my character said. Probably less though, because he took it somewhat well. Dren asked what exactly I could bring to the table for the Kmona Tong, and from here I really only had one option. I told Orvas that with a Hlaalu/Kmona Tong alliance, both of our factions would prosper. With a disposition of only 39, he wasn't really buying it. He understood the benefits, but he doesn't trust me, rightfully so. Nor does he think I understand how their side of the business works, also true. Plus, he's worried about Imperial rule on Vvardenfell. Considering I'm taking orders from a guy with the Empire's flag behind him, probably a good precaution to have. However, all of that goes down the drain with a simple charm spell. Raising Orvas's disposition to 89 and trying again, this time he finds me a lot more trustworthy. Since we last spoke, so 3 seconds ago, he's heard of my deeds around Vvardenfell and thinks that we can now work together. After taking a few more moments to consider it, Dren believes that him and I would make excellent partners. A firm handshake later, and I'm now a co-ruler of the Kmona Tong, I guess. Technically, that's as far as it needs to go. Violence is definitely not needed. You don't have to cast Frenzy to avoid collateral from Orvas's bodyguards. You also don't have to know that he's a level 18 warrior who fights with an ebony spear and dons orcish armor. Furthermore, just forget that he's conspiring to murder his brother and supports slavery on Morrowind. From here, my job is done and the impossible alliance was created. Returning to Ebonheart and informing the Duke, even he's surprised that I got the job done. He just asks that I use my new connections for the good of Vvardenfell. As a final reward for this questline, Duke Vidam Dren names me the new Grand Master for House Hlaalu. That's it, I've now reached the top. There's nowhere else to go, and technically, that should be it for House Hlaalu. With that, thus ends the quest, dealing with Orvas Dren. Except, that's not the end for House Hlaalu. In fact, it's far from it. It's true, I have to complete my Stronghold still. Without even considering that though, there are technically 3 hidden quests for this storyline. No one tells you about this quest giver, and honestly, she's pretty tucked away from the rest of the house. However, she is tied to House Hlaalu, and her assignments are above petty revenge and extortion. In some way, shape, or form, the Nerevarine will have crossed paths with Ilmeni Dren, the daughter of the Duke. Ilmeni is the subject for a quest from the Legion as well as the Thieves Guild. Maybe through your travels with those factions, you'll have come across Dren while being a member of House Hlaalu. It's like asking for the stars to align there, but it's definitely not impossible. Chatting with Ilmeni, she asks who I am and what I'm doing there. I'm your overlord now, you swit. Dren will have the topic of business available, and it's as easy as that to get into her first assignment. However, she sort of gets heated at the mention of business. According to her, how could we possibly talk about that when there are people who can't read? Not exactly related to one another, but I'll bite. Dren tells me that there are teachers in the Mages Guild who are trying to help the illiterate, but without proper books, it makes their lessons that much trickier for both parties. Because of that, Ilmeni asks that I find and donate 2 books to the Aldrun Mages Guild. The first is the Annotated Enued, and the second is ABCs for Barbarians. Sounds simple enough. The first place I went looking was Joe Bosch's bookstore. Seldomly has Joe Boscher let me down. I found the Annotated Enued there for about 56 gold, but no dice on the ABCs. No matter, as the next shop I can turn to is literally right below Joe Bosch's. Checking with Simon Ferlini, no dice there either for the ABCs. Having to flip to the back pages here, I decided to go with the bookseller in Balmora next. Codus Colonus and Aldrun came to mind first, but that man never has the books that I'm looking for. Luckily for me, Dorissa Darvel was my last stop on this scavenger hunt. Gazing at her selection, I spotted ABCs for Barbarians and forked over 26 gold for it. I sure hope there's some sort of reimbursement program with either Ilmeni or the Mages Guild. For my own curiosity, I decided to take a peek at these books, just to see what the illiterate were going to read from. Well, in my opinion, these were terrible choices. The annotated Enwad isn't exactly first grade reading material, although it is quite the interesting read. I've never read it before today. And the ABCs might be a little too simple. It's 3 pages long. A is for Atronak, B is for Bungler's Bane, and C is for Comberry. What about the rest of the alphabet and not literally just A, B, and C? Well, you know what? It's best to just let that be a Mages Guild problem. With the books in hand, I traveled over to the Aldrun Guild Hall and presented them to Vala Catrasso. The interaction was brief and she thanked me for the donation. There wasn't much more to it than that. Returning to Ilmeni, she pretty much mirrored Vala's dialogue and thanked me for my good deed. I guess there's no reimbursement then, eh? With that, thus ends the quest, Literacy Campaign. Alright, quest number 2 for Ilmeni Dren is a bit of a doozy. It had me scratching my head and uttering the famous words, "Is my game bugged?" Essentially, when asked about business, the house cousin mentions that slavery is the real business of Ardenfell. Following the slavery thread, she then asks if I've heard of the Twin Lamps. My response to this is either yes or no. The first time I answered no, which I'm not sure why, as I had heard of them. I just thought she'd give me an explanation of the faction. Well, her response was not that. She replied with an apology and said that she thought her and I might have had common interests. Okay, well, trying again and this time saying, yeah, of course I've heard of them. Her response doesn't change. She says the exact same thing. I was so confused here. Disposition was maxed out, there were no other dialogue options. What was I supposed to do? Well, referencing my personal Elder Scroll, I learned that there was a lot more to this next quest than meets the eye. A whole lot more. In order to receive this next mission, I had to free at least 20 or so slaves. I'm sure you all know this, but the people of Ardenfell don't treat the beast folk very nicely. Heck, there are even Dunmer that get bought and sold as well. For the Argonians and Khajiit though, they usually use them as laborers and servants. Most of the time, they can be found at plantations and at places of influence. However, they can also be found locked up in caves, dungeons, and strongholds. Those are probably the easiest places to find and free the beast folk. The unofficial Elder Scrolls pages has an entire list of Ardenfell slaves that can act as a great reference. By doing this method, killing their masters and taking the key won't net you an arrest or anything of the sorts. Plus, you'll usually find groups of slaves corralled into these cages, meaning you can bang out that number pretty quickly. As soon as 20 or so NPCs have been freed, they'll start to mention the Twin Lamps faction. They asked me if I was a part of the guild, which I told them no. While surprised to hear that, they felt like they could trust me with their code words and secret phrases. Now, if someone asks about the Twin Lamps, instead of saying yes or no, I could respond with, they light the way to freedom. Doing just that with Ilmeni Dren, the next quest was finally opened up. This time, Dren said that she was glad to meet another member and brought up a family that needed help in Aldvelothi. My contact there is someone named Galen Arvel, and she'll be able to bring me up to speed. Well, not wanting to waste any more time, I made way for the coastal village. Aldvelothi is a place that I always forget exists. I was looking for ports and silt striders that passed through there, but nothing came up. From Nissus, you just kind of have to head north, or from Kuul, you gotta go southwest. Albeit, it's not that complicated to get to. Arriving, no one has Galen Arvel as a dialogue option, so again, it's back to the old detective skills. Fortunately, Aldvelothi has a population of about 10, so finding Galen doesn't take too long. Chatting with the Dunmer, I brought up the topic of slavery, and she gave me the lowdown. There's a Khajiit slave in the area named Jasada. All he has to do is make it to Arvel's ship, and he's home free. However, some slave hunters have set up in town and are blocking off his escape. He's currently hiding out at the local Daedric ruin, but if they catch him, he's getting sent back to the plantation, or worse. Galen asks that I escort Jasada to the boat. That can either be done through violence or stealth. The choice is mine. Well, already having my mind made up, I wandered over to Ashomawia and passed a few of the hunters. Oh, I was coming back for them, but first I needed to touch base with Jasada. The Khajiit was tucked away into the ruin, somehow avoiding contact with all of the Daedra. He was hesitant at first to travel together due to the slave hunters still being around. However, I assured him that there was nothing to worry about. Sword in hand, we traveled back to the ship and crossed paths with two of them. They only turned aggressive when Jasada got close, but they didn't live long enough to do anything meaningful. The trek through town into the docks was uneventful, and as soon as we touched down by Galen, Jasada was free and clear. Both the Khajiit and Arvel thanked me for my services. Galen suggested that I return to Ilmeni and informed her of my work here. Way ahead of you there. Reporting to Dren, she just sort of hit me with the, there's still more work to do, which that's fair, as there were other assignments on the horizon. With that, thus ends the quest, the Twin Lamps. Chatting with Ilmeni again, I asked her for my next task, which, mind you, would be my last one coming from her. It had to do with the Twin Lamps again, except this time I was headed right for the Lion's Den. Ilmeni says that the Dren plantation is one of the worst places a slave can end up. Cruel masters, hard work, little chances of escaping. One of the slaves there, hides his foot, knows some valuable information regarding Orvas Dren. Apart from the obvious, rescuing a slave, Ilmeni makes him a top priority, as more than likely, the Twin Lamps can use this intel against Orvas and the Kimona Tong. Once I've sprung Hydes' foot from the plantation, I'm to escort him to Strdeken's farm, which should be somewhere in the Ascadian Isles region. This quest was honestly a lot of fun. There are a few different approaches that could be taken here. You can use magic to evade the guards, or you can use good old-fashioned stealth. If force is more up your alley, you could take out the guards ahead of time, or if you want a real thriller, you could do what I did and just free the Argonian. Hydes' foot spends his time in the yard, and speaking with him, no key is needed for the escape. I just told him to follow me, and that was enough to capture the attention of the guards. As Foot and I made a break for it, all of these Kimona Tong / Hlaalu thugs came charging at us. As Grand Master of the house, this probably wasn't the most popular move, but hey, it's not like they could do anything about it now. The only people who came for us were the armed guards along the plantation's exterior. There were only about half a dozen of them, and taking them out wasn't too tricky or challenging, at least as a high-leveled character. Lower-leveled Nerevarines might have some difficulty as their levels and classes range, but they mostly come at the player one at a time, so you wouldn't really get overwhelmed. Plus, if all else fails, run for the hills and don't look back. Now for the second half of the quest, finding Strdeken's farm. Chatting with Hydes' foot, his directions are simple but effective. The farm is somewhere northeast along the road from Dren Plantation, so naturally, following the pathway and crossing my fingers, I'd end up spotting a humble settlement not too far from Dren's setup. Here I met with Strdeken, although he didn't have much quest-relevant dialogue. That didn't really matter though, as all that needed to happen was Hydes' foot making it inside of the farmhouse. As soon as the Argonian was safe and sound, he thanked me for his freedom and offered to reveal Orvas Dren's secret. Now, this isn't too relevant to my current timeline, but if this were maybe a few quests ago, or even the main quest line, it would have come way more in handy. Basically, there's a written note in the villa's basement that details Orvas' plot to kill his brother. By acquiring this note, it would be extremely easy to blackmail Orvas into doing whatever I'd want. Like, go, I don't know, making an alliance with the Kimona Tong or becoming the Hlaalu Hordator. In any case, with the job done, I recalled to Vivek and reported my success to Ilmeni. She thanked me for my efforts and said that, as a reward, she'll speak to her father on my behalf. Yeah, at this point in the questline, there's really no need for that, but whatever floats her boat, I guess. With that, thus ends the quest, free Hydes' foot. Alright, that knocks out every single quest for the House Hlaalu storyline. -1. It's time to finish up with Reynel Manor and close out the adventure. Of course, the person to speak with is Dondos Dryler in Balmora. Before, he said he'd only work with me again if I was a councilman. Well, now I'm the Grand Master, so I don't think he can refuse my time anymore. Chatting with Dryler, he says that he's prepared to give me a stronghold suitable for my needs. However, before other NPCs are willing to move to Reynel Manor, Dondos says that I should find a way to guard the stronghold against bandits. In order to do this, he suggests that I hire some bodyguards from either the Imperial Legion or the Fighters Guild. Well, I didn't even bother with the Legion. I read after the fact that they wouldn't have had anyone to spare anyway, so I feel even more confident in my choice now. As for the Fighters Guild, the NPCs in there directed me to someone named Flania, as apparently she's in charge of the contracts. Flania says that the guild doesn't really have the manpower to spare. However, she does know someone who could do the trick. I guess he's not a formal Fighters Guild member, but as long as it's a body to cover the gateway, that's all that matters. Paying 1,000 gold, I enlisted the help of someone named Fjorgir. The Nords should be waiting for me by the manor. I read on the UESP that technically you don't even really need to hire him for this quest. While he does offer his companionship for the crawl, he's mostly just good for revealing the location of the bandit hideout. If you already know where their HQ is though, then save your money. Chatting with Fjorgir, he says that the ruffians are held up in a cave called Zain Sipilu. When the topic of fighting together gets brought up, he feels the need to mention that he'll be my shield brother if the gold is good. Unsure if that means I'd have to pay him again or not, I decided to just go solo on this one. Plus, most friendly NPCs just tend to get in the way in times like these. Zain Sipilu is across the Odai River and along the pathway south. It's tucked into the mountains and honestly, not the easiest cave to spot, at least for me. Maybe my navigational skills are getting better. The cave itself is home to 8 bandits. There are also 5 slaves in here, and honestly, the 5-head play would have been to roll through this dungeon during Ilmeni's questline and free the slaves. 2 birds with 1 stone. It gets even better though, as technically, the only bandit you actually need to kill is Maros Gamane. More than likely, you'd still need to take out 4 of the ruffians just to get to him, but it's better than 8. Or if you want the extra combat experience, take them all out, whatever works. As soon as Maros was dead, I returned to Balmora for the final time. Informing Dryler that the area is now safe, he said that he'll put in the word and give the orders on the finishing touches. So there goes another 5 productive and adventurous business days, embarking on quests, looting dungeons, and making brand new discoveries. As soon as that last journal update hit, that was it. That was the end of the Stronghold quest, and that was it for House Hlaalu's questline. Rethan Manor is now fully built. All of its residents are situated inside the Stronghold, and the remaining services and items have been added in. It's now a manor fit for the Grand Master of House Hlaalu. So that's it. That's the end of the House Hlaalu questline, and for that matter, the end of the Great House storylines. It's bittersweet, as at this point, I only have the Thieves Guild left to play through. Technically, there's all the vampiric quests as well, which I will be doing, but either way, the big storylines for Morrowind are almost at an end. Now, let's talk about House Hlaalu. Admittedly, I think I enjoyed their questline the most out of the 3 great houses. Don't get me wrong, I liked all of them, but I especially adored the diplomacy and political route that was presented here. I enjoyed conquering the ebony trade, rooting out corruption, presenting new corruption by extorting outsiders, and creating alliances. It was also neat to finally get to work alongside the Twin Lamps, even though there were only 2 quests involving them. To me, the Hlaalu questline just felt more concise than some of the other ones out there. It had a sense of flow and continuation to it that I think a lot of questlines lack in Morrowind. As mentioned previously, the Ebony Trade was a long-standing subject for this questline, and Oldril Helvi's arc with Crassius Curio tied in nicely for a good 10 or so missions. I also liked reporting to Duke Vidam Dren. It was nice to see him actually get some time in the limelight. I guess to sum it up, for House Hlaalu, it felt like their story more so focused on current-day Vardenfell. It involved a lot of modern-day big players and influential figures. The Ordinators, the Empire, the Twin Lamps, the Kimona Tong, etc. Almost everyone who plays a major role in the politics of current-day Vardenfell was present in the story. That's very on brand for a faction such as House Hlaalu, who focuses on economics, bureaucracy, and politics. House Redoran, the warrior faction, is more so focused on honor, strength, and duty, the old ways of Morrowind, and I feel like that was reflected in their questline. Meanwhile, House Tilvani prefers isolation, research, and wisdom. Guess what? Their storyline had reflected that as well. All of these questlines coincide with their different ways of life and worldly perspectives. Having left House Hlaalu's story for pretty much last, it had a great tie-in with a bunch of these other questlines and plots. Truly, I don't think there's a whole lot that I would change with the story. I'm by no means saying that it's perfect, but for my rather low questing standards, I'm quite content with how things went. Thank you everyone for coming along this journey with me. I'd love to know your thoughts and opinions on the storyline down below, and until next time, keep on adventuring. Hello, Dumpling.
I'd be happy to talk. My pleasure, really.